Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil YouTube video. Today we've got Season 7, Episode 6. I should have the DNA test results today for all these seedlings, but as you can see, they're growing quick. So I need to make sure that we have plans for the new home. One thing you'll notice down here is all these pots that I made up. These are all the 10-gallon grassroots pots. They're not in their final home because we're gonna align them in rows, but I have this table here, kind of blocking it. I was gonna do one episode on each irrigation system and I realized that's so complicated. It's really pretty basic to do this stuff. So I'm gonna do my best to show you how to set up a container just as I've set these up, following the BuildASoil new container setup. And so when you get a new container, we want to establish the mulch layer and start to create the no-till process. So we're going to discuss that today. So today's main point is to show you how to set up a container. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each irrigation style that we'll be using a little bit deeper today to show you how we're going to actually have it running. And then when we get the DNA testing, I'm going to go over that. And the day we do the transplanting, I'm going to actually install the irrigation. And even then, I may not turn the irrigation on for a little while until the plants get bigger. And so we'll talk about it each step as we go. Just know that in the very beginning when I plant, they're not gonna need immediate watering. I can always install these systems later. However, the OLLAs take a bit of digging. So today I'm gonna build a new container using the two OLLAs so you can see how I do that. All the other containers are identical. There's just no OLLA in it. You'll see what I mean in just a minute when I show you what that is and how I set it up. I'm also gonna go over the new container setup and follow it exactly. So you can see, if you follow this, the results that you're gonna get. Before I do that, just wanna grab some seedlings and show you what they look like. All of them have white matted roots on the bottom, which is pretty cool. And that's indicative of the bottom irrigation that's happening because the roots are gonna seek out that water. But they're already starting to get a little bit close and overgrown. See all the roots? And so it's pretty neat, but it's kind of turbocharged in the sense that they have unlimited clean water once the roots get down there. And so to make sure I'm keeping up with nutrition, so they're not just drinking just water, they're getting food, I've foliar sprayed with the BuildAVeg. But at a certain point, I need to transplant them. And so if I get the test results today, I still don't have time to transplant. It's a Friday. Farmer Freeman's really quick, so I'll probably get the answers this afternoon. I'm gonna ride it through the weekend in this same setup. And then on Monday, we're gonna go over the test results, separate males from females, see what we're working with, and then decide if we transplant that day or the next day and make sure they're all happy and ready for it. And then as we get involved, we'll be actually firing up some of the irrigation to test it and make sure it's working, and we'll document that. So let's get started. I wanna go over the container setup. And so I'm gonna move around a little bit right here. I'll probably set the first one up right here. So let me just set this out of the way. First thing I'm gonna do is just go ahead and open this OLLA kit so I can show you what it comes with. This kit is the 4x6 watering kit. If you're doing it in the garden, you can use this auger on a drill to make a perfect hole for your OLLA to go in. The OLLA is this shape. And so this would make a hole and you could put this, bury it in your garden. In potting soil, you don't really need this. I just grabbed it because I realized my knife's not on me. And that'll help me open the box. And then this is what comes in the kit. So you can see it's got the directions, all the stuff from Thirsty Earth. It comes with all of the fittings, which I'll show you. And this allows you to connect the tubes to each OLLA. Super basic. And then inside here, you can see that this is very similar. This is the larger one, so it has a slightly larger reservoir. I'm actually gonna take this one home. This one's a slightly smaller reservoir. Since it has a float valve in it, I don't care about the size of the reservoir. Mine's automated. When you're at home, this bucket actually lasts a long time for a small grow. And so you can just top this off with the hose, or you can set up a larger system by connecting your hose to it, whatever you want, because it has the float valve. And so the lid really does stay pretty well on here. Let's open it. So here's all the OLLAs that I'll be using. I've got a couple of them already over here today that are open. But I just wanted to show you how well they're packed, the whole system, so you could see. And then your float valve's already installed. The bottom's already installed. The back's already installed. Everything's ready as soon as you get it. I'm gonna set that to the side because I'm not gonna use it. I will need some of these OLLAs. That's why I brought the kit in here. I didn't have enough. But let's get to the setup. Okay, so here's one Olla that's already built. This is what it looks like, and it's gonna go right here and the tube goes in and it just pours water in here. And then your plants that grow near it can wrap their roots around this and drink directly from here. And if they're not drinking, like before the roots access it, this will actually spill, it'll just slowly allow water to come out, keeping your soil nice and moist because this is porous material. And just to show you, I've already used these ones, how easy they are. That's all it is, the cup. It's just terracotta cup, sits in there. But what's neat is this double valve, like the sealing system and how it works. And on the inside, there's just a rubber grommet in here. And you use the same tubing in a 3-inch piece. And that just goes inside. And you can see it allows the water to just deposit right in here. Whatever fitting you're gonna use connects right to the top, quick connect. And then your water goes in. It's just so easy, it's kind of ridiculous. So here's the rubber ring you can see. So typically what happens is you have the rubber ring and then this goes on top and it smashes it in there so it's watertight. So that's all you need, just enough to get the water in. And then on top of here, quick connect and it's done. And then to actually, once you're done cleaning this, like for the winter, you can just keep these ends, they don't freeze. Clean them, make sure everything's good. And then this just drops in here. It's gotta be a nice seal. And then this straps around the bottom. And now I'm ready for the garden again. And so super easy to maintain. And now that I've got 2 that are complete, I'm actually gonna install them in this setup right now. These. All right, so I'm doing it in the grow room instead of up on a table. This is probably how you're gonna do it. So I'm just gonna do it just how you're gonna do it at home. And so following our new container setup, you can go to BuildASoil.com. On the top, there's the educational tab. You'll see this for download there once you click on it. And the first step is what to use, a living organic soil recipe. Ideally, we'd use about 15-gallon minimum. We're doing 10-gallon because we're doing a sea of green. We're gonna flip the flower really soon. So we're not gonna grow a huge plant out of here. And so the main principle with no-till is you don't want a plant that's much larger than your container, or you've kind of inverted the equation there, and now you're gonna have to feed more instead of allowing them to work within the living soil. We're gonna use 3.0 recipe, but on here we have homemade and BuildASoil. So you can choose the BuildASoil product, which we list here, or we give you the reason why we're doing this. So if you live somewhere else in the world, you can mimic what we're doing without our products. That's a big part of our process. Creating independence, not dependence. So I'm gonna use 3.0 soil. This will take about 1 1/3 bags. I wanna fill it, leaving a little bit of room because I'm gonna set up a mulch layer afterwards. So I just grab the string here, open the bag. I'm just gonna carefully go like this and tip. I know it'll hold the whole bag, so it's no big deal. Oh, it looks great. Moisture's really good. I'm happy with that. Moisture is something that's important, and so we address it on here, and we give you some information about a squeeze test. So if using smaller containers, please keep the plant size smaller, and or use the supplemental feeding schedule, which we're gonna be going over this season. In a smaller container, this feeding schedule becomes more important. When you're in a larger container, it becomes less important. The idea is to keep the pressure off the soil, especially when we have really fast-growing plants. And of course, we have lots of fun stuff to supplement, so we're gonna be going over that. If you wanna look for water only, watch season 6. We call it the BuildASoil Classic method, and that's bigger containers, water only. So for this one, living organic soil recipe is our 3.0, so let's finish this part. I wanna put the Ollas in first, and I just make sure it's all the way to the sides. There's no air pockets. And then I'm gonna kinda compress it down so that I can work with these Ollas here and decide the height. And I'm just gonna push. I want them to be buried to just above the terracotta with a little bit of the plastic showing, but I don't want to bury up above in here and potentially get debris down in there. There is a rubber seal, but I just want it to be clean. Normally what I do is I have a couple inches of room, which would put the soil here. So I'm going to bury it slightly deeper, and then we're going to have the mulch layer. And so it's kind of up to you, but if this is too exposed, it's not getting all of the surface area with the soil. So I'm more focused on that. So let me just dig this out a little bit with my hand. I want to have good contact regardless. I think that's just about perfect. So I'm going to pack around it. I don't want it to be air pockets around this thing. Okay, same with the blue mats. So I can always rotate this later, so that direction doesn't matter right now. Essentially, we're just going to connect the tube to all of them. and I want enough room. Now, I want a little room from the sides. I'm kind of packing a lot in here because there's 2, and you can see I need to fit the plant in here as well. And so 1 might be enough for a container like this, but I know that an 8 kit setup, they even mentioned it on here, does about 3 1/3 gallons per week. And to double that water output, you can just raise your reservoir a little bit, or you can hand water. And so I was thinking that 2 of them would be enough for how fast we're gonna be growing the plants, and I really wanna fit it in there. But obviously in a 10 gallon, it's pretty tight. So I'm gonna go slightly closer to the edges in these living soil pots. I think that's totally acceptable. So I'm gonna go over just a little bit. Try and install them all about the same. That looks pretty good. Pack it down. It's not rocket science, like really you don't have to be perfect, but I'm just wanting to make sure I do a good demonstration, as this is the first time we're using these on camera. So now I'll get my other bag of soil, which I won't need all of it, but I've got more containers to set up. Okay. I've got a scoop over here. It'll make it a little bit easier with the Ollas. So I'll do the squeeze test and a few things to show you the moisture that's listed on our guide. But just looking at this, I can tell the moisture is pretty nice. I'm definitely gonna wanna add some, but it's not bone dry or anything. If it's bone dry, it's not the end of the world, but we really wanna make sure that we get it moist, because peat can be hydrophobic and it'll repel water until it gets to about this level of moisture. So what I'm trying to do is, once compressed, get it to the top of the ceramic here. And a little more to go, and then packing the edges. There's a few flies flying around here. We're by the back door, and there's like a farm out back. So you'll see a few flying around when we have all the doors open, but we're gonna keep it sealed up once we get going, so we keep flies out of the grow. Okay, looks pretty good. I still got a couple inches for my mulch layer, which is what I wanted. Now it's totally up to you. Some people actually dig out their transplant size and they kind of prepare things ahead. Normally I don't do this, I just dig it out when I'm ready. But some people like to get everything exactly ready, right? So they have like the shape of where they're gonna transplant figured out, and then they don't put cover crop seed right there. To me, it doesn't matter, I just dig it back out, but I wanted to show you because a lot of people do that. And I think the idea with a lot of people doing this is that once they go to transplant, they don't have to dig it all and disturb all of the mycelium and everything that starts to get created. But nature's not that fickle. Okay, I still need just a little more uneven. There we go. So all these containers were set up the same way, just no Ollas. And I didn't put this center cup in here. I'm having fun just showing you all the options. So now let's go to the next part. It says all-purpose soil amendment. So for BuildASoil, that's gonna be our craft blend. Anywhere else in the world, you might have a go-to kind of all-purpose soil amendment. You can also research our complete organic fertilizer. Steve Solomon has a report on how to create that. It's from his book. That's how we created our craft blend. It's how the Coots recipe was originally created. So check out Steve Solomon's complete organic fertilizer. We have a free report at BuildASoil. You can learn how to do that. Let me grab the craft blend. And so on here, I mentioned using a 1/4 cup. I have a note on the bottom. If you're doing a sea of green, 1/4 cup's not enough for the bed. It's more like a 1/4 cup per plant, but that might be a lot. So at the end of the day, we're just trying to evenly put this amendment around. And so I'm gonna do the 1/4 cup. This is a 1/2 cup measurement, so 1/2 of 1/2. And then I'm just gonna go around, instead of on the Ollas, I'm gonna do it everywhere else. And this is our craft blend. 15 different ingredients. Right now we're building the mulch layer. So once the plant gets in here, it's gonna send feeder roots up to the top. And that's where it'll get a lot of its fertility from, besides what's already built in the soil. The reason why we do it with soil that's already loaded is this sets up feeder roots to go where the increased fertility is. And then the rest of the plant lives in the very balanced soil that we created. And whether you do this now or on your second cycle, eventually we have to start adding through the top, or we're gonna grow a plant and keep taking from the soil, and it can't last forever that way. So to do no-till, well, we never throw it away. We started using pumice so that the soil lasts forever. We use lots of compost, lots of rock dust, and then we build the mulch layer. That's what I'm doing right now. So that's the craft blend. Next on the list, bokashi. A lot of people put a bokashi in the mulch layer. It helps break down with the lactobacillus, and it starts to break down that mulch layer and make it more available. You don't have to add that. not all of this is mandatory, and since I didn't go grab a bag out of inventory, I'm gonna skip that step. We use Kashi Blend from Growing Organic, and it's a phenomenal product. It's got a few extras over regular Bokashi, and it's loaded in the lacto. But in any case, what we're gonna do is just go to the next step, which is the sprouted seed flour. We're gonna use gnarly barley. Coot taught us about sprouted seeds. They are incredible, and so we really like using them. This is the gnarly barley. It's floured. I like to get the whole and grind it fresh. A lot of people like to get the already floured because it's so nice. Totally up to you which one you go. It's an 1/8 of a cup instead of a 1/4 of a cup. There's already a little sprouted seed in the craft blend, so this is just kind of extra. You don't have to do this as well, but I really like using the gnarly barley, so I'm gonna do it. That's it, I'm just sprinkling it around the mulch layer, nothing crazy. You'll see what I do later, because this will create like a cake that you can't really water through, and you don't wanna do that. So I'm gonna show you how we do things by continuing to follow the guide. So the next step is BuildASoil or Colorado Worm Company castings. Really anywhere in the world, it'd be compost or vermicompost. You wanna find a reputable brand that you really like. I've got castings right here that are full of life. The reason why I use the Coco with a new container, they come with worms and cocoons and a lot of life, and we guarantee it. And so as I use this, this will start to increase my worm population without me having to go buy worms, and I really like that. So I'm gonna grab a scoop here. There we go. Now, I already used some of this bag yesterday on the rest of them, and there was like at least 15, 20 worms so far. Normally I find a couple, and typically if you saw the video on the worm castings, they move kind of around to the bottom, and even if you don't see live worms, there are cocoons in here that develop into live worms. So as soon as you start using this and feeding it, all the life starts to come out. So the idea is to put about a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch layer all the way around. And so it looks like I put plenty of castings in here. Main difference between all these is these Ollas do take a little space. So I'm kind of removing some of my soil to irrigate. All right, so now that's set up. That's not the final part. We want to integrate it. And so on here it says mix with the previous 2 ingredients in the mulch layer to prevent caking and stimulate the nutrients. And so now what I'm gonna do is I actually go like this with my fingers, and I'm working it into that top inch or so. The reason why I do that is it now integrates all these nutrients with that Colorado Worm Company compost, and that's gonna create the availability of nutrients. It's gonna stop anything from caking so that the water goes through should I have to top water along with the Ollas. And part of the reason why I like the Ollas is you can kind of control it, so they're not gonna be fully watering through the stretch. I'll be able to hand water and add in some extras. I think that'd be pretty fun. So now we worked the top, getting a little bit full. I like to leave just a little bit more room, but honestly, it doesn't have to be perfect. Next is cover crop seeds. So we're gonna use our 12 seed cover crop blend from BuildASoil. You can just use a diverse blend of your favorite cover crop seed, sprinkle evenly across the surface. It's gonna grow, it's gonna send exudates in the soil, and when we chop and drop it with the straw we're gonna use, it creates soil basically by combining the browns and greens, and the worms are gonna work it all. So let me grab the cover crop seed, and then I just sprinkle it on here, going around the Ollas. That's plenty. Any that is like excessive that doesn't germinate, or if you put too many, it's gonna be like fertilizer for the soil anyways, and this is gonna all activate. And even if you just chop and drop it right away, it's like a living fertilizer, because all these seeds are gonna germinate, send exudates down in the soil, and they're gonna have enzymes as part of the germination process, and they're gonna put roots in the soil, making it really a living soil. And then we just terminate them right away and turn that back into food, or we can let them grow along with the plant as a living mulch. Either way, what I'm doing right now is not trying to bury them so much because they're small seeds, but just integrate so that any of the seeds, instead of pouring them on the top, there actually is a little bit of contact with the soil. So when I water it, they get wet and they germinate. If they're just sitting on the top, sometimes it won't be moist enough to germinate. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just tamp it all down. That way that cover crop is absolutely in there and going to germinate. Okay, and then normally I don't put the cup in there. It's really not necessary. I just want to show you because some people do it when you go to transplant. I'll just pull this out, take one of these, pop it out, and put it right in. I'm gonna put a mulch layer over this so that I can follow the entire procedure. When you're doing this at home, if you're gonna start a seed in here, I put the cover crop in after the plant grows bigger so that my cover crop isn't competing. Otherwise, what you can do is grow the cover crop for a couple weeks, chop and drop it all, till it into the top layer, and then plant your plant. So there's many ways to do this. but the setup is always the same, and so I just wanted to show that to you. Let's grab some straw and let's finalize this setup. So I've got some of our organic straw mulch, locally produced. It's great. I put a hose in here to make it a little bit wet so that it's not so dusty. You might want to do that when you're in your house. Sometimes I'll grab scissors and I'll actually be able to like cut the edges that are sticking out so it looks all nice and clean like this, but really it doesn't matter that much. And then we also have the oyster straw log that we used on the 4x4, and that has the mycelium from the blue oyster mushrooms. Not totally necessary, but really fun. So I'm just gonna make a mess and I'll clean it up afterwards. This is gonna block the light, protecting the soil, allowing the worms to come all the way up to the top. But in the guide, what I tell you is you don't want mulch so thick that we suffocate and block our cover crop. And so I'm just going to be putting enough in here to kind of block the light, but make sure the cover crop can still grow through. And then what we're gonna do is just turn these and we'll connect our tube from the water reservoir through around in a circle and then just go down the line to each container. And now you can see what I was talking about, where what you can do if you want is just sit here for a minute and kind of move it around, or you can go grab like the edges and just cut it. If you give yourself a little more room, it'll kind of stay nestled in there like the other ones, but with the Ollas, I really want to make sure we put enough soil in here so that it's a fair comparison. Masanobu Fukuoka kind of talks about that. He says, just throw the straw down. Doesn't need to be perfectly organized. But he wasn't growing indoor, making a mess. Okay, that's the basic setup. We've done everything except for the last step, which is to water it. And so on here, as we go through, you'll look at this on your own. You can print it out. Mulch layers, the organic straw, and then worms. Now, we use the Coco, so we're gonna get worms just right out of there. In each bag, there's gonna be some. And they start to multiply pretty quickly. And so you'll see if you start to use it. Otherwise, what you can do is go buy like a pound of worms. Start your own worm bin, and then take some of those worms and put them in your containers. It's another economical way to do it. Locally, we have a local worm lady that'll, if you live around, you can stop by and she'll drop off worms. Otherwise, you can go online and figure that out. We recommend like 5 to 20 worms per container. A lot of people put a ton of them in there. You don't need to. Like if you put a few, they're gonna multiply and they're gonna establish a colony that's about the right size for that container instead of maybe being too much, too fast. Lastly, we're gonna mix up our water, and on an initial new container setup, especially with all the castings and compost that we add in there, what we like to do is use 3 types of input. You don't have to use them. They're very important to me. So the first 2 are the biology. Number 1 is the Rootwise Microbe Complete. This is your mycorrhizae, as well as all the other indigenous microorganisms from healthy farms. It's very complete. Most of the other products on the market, you have to buy like the nitrogen fixer, you have to buy the mycorrhizae, you have to buy the azospirillum, which is the nitrogen fixer. You have to buy the bacillus. This has all of it in there, and it's by a company that's made in the United States. If you follow us at all, you know this is our flagship microbial product. So we're gonna add some of this, and this is our WDG 3000. This is the fungus gnat killer, and this is just a biology. And so instead of having to kill them, what we wanna do is prevent any larvae that might be in the compost. So we're gonna set up the new container that we just did with these 2 products. And then the third one is a wetting agent. And on there, I mentioned you can use anything. We have the Q20, the Q60, and the Thermex 70 are our most popular. I'm just gonna use this because the bag's already open. I really do like the Thermex 70 a lot. If you're somewhere else in the world, find a high saponin product. We used to just cut up aloe vera leaves and blend them. We have an aloe product, but these are higher in saponin. So saponin's common in alfalfa, many other plants. So you can make a saponin tea, so to speak. You can use soap bark, like these are. Also, you might have access to these types of products in your country. So I've got my watering can. The final phase would be for me to water those products in and moisten this, since I just established it. I don't have a lot of time today, and you've seen me mix up materials a million times. Just know that if you follow this, the last step, it shows you exactly how much to add. 1 teaspoon per gallon, along with Rootwise and wetting agent. The mycorrhizae, the Rootwise, we're gonna do a 1/2 teaspoon per gallon. The wetting agent, I'm gonna do a 1/16, like barely any of that Q60 in there. And then I water it in. Now the key to knowing how to water it in, I mentioned on here, is the squeeze test. So this soil, when I first get it, when you squeeze a whole bunch of soil in your hand, you want it to hold shape and not completely fall apart. See how there's a little shape? It could use more water. But most people, what they do is they get it too wet. And that's a bummer because overwatering is a problem. Obviously dry is not good. So most people, they're okay with that part. What I want you to do is when you add water to your container, you can figure this out here. When you squeeze it, you should have like a bead of water dripping around your knuckles, which you won't see here. I haven't added the water. But what you don't want is when I squeeze it to drain water down. So the squeeze test teaches you squeezing it, and if it wrings out, your soil's too wet. If it barely beads up with water, it's probably perfect and it'll hold nice shape. If it holds shape like this, it's probably just the ideal moisture, but when we transplant, we're gonna need to add a little more. So seeing that I don't need to go add like gallons of water here, I'm actually happy with that moisture. I just need enough to glue all of the cover crop seeds in there and moisten those amendments and compost. In a 10-gallon container, I usually recommend at setup to add about a half gallon of water or less. You can always go back later and add a little more. I've got a Chapin over there with a few gallons of water in it. So I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna give about a quarter gallon of water to each one of these and make sure that they're completely saturated on top, moistening that cover crop so it germinates. That's the key thing. Plus it puts all the mycorrhizae in there with the cover crop and it all comes to life before we transplant. If you wanted to, I could do this right now. I could put my transplant in and I could water immediately. But since I haven't gotten the DNA results, I'm just gonna set this one to the side, make sure I water it, and then on Monday when I come back in, we'll do the transplant on camera and we'll do that together. So that's what I wanted to cover for this. Let me move it out of the way so we can finalize the discussion about irrigation and how we're gonna be doing it. So move that to the side. Let's start all the way at the reservoir. I'm gonna walk you through the entire setup and then I'm gonna show it to you so you know what we're working with. So we're now at the irrigation setup, which you can see is just a brute trash can. You use really anything. We're indoors, so it's not like the sun's hitting ours or anything, but there's considerations there. Like if you put a 275-gallon reservoir in your backyard and it's clear and it grows algae, that might be something that you wanna think of. How are you gonna cover it? How are you gonna keep the water cold? Other people ask, are you gonna put an air stone in there and bubble it? I'm not. A lot of people do. They wanna aerate their water so it's constantly agitated and keeping it aerated. I'm not gonna do that, but you definitely can. And we set this up on season 6, but I reset it up for season 7. And so out the bottom is just a connection and the gravity is pushing the water down and it comes through here. You just quick connect fittings and then it goes right up through this filter, which is very basic in case I had any sediment in the water for whatever reason. Then it goes into this pump. Now, this is a pretty expensive setup. I've heard that Sustainable Village is gonna release a more home-based version, but just know that they run thousands of plants a lot of times on this types of setup. So they really need to have a good pump. And this is a very good quality brand. On top of that, it has a pressure reducer and all of these fittings do add up in money when I try and price them out individually. But if you've never seen something like this is a pump with a bladder. And so this bladder keeps air in there like a balloon. And so right now it's actually full of pressure, where normally without this bladder, the pump would have to be constantly on to keep the pressure. You can see we're about 12 PSI right here. We're not set up though, so when it's running, it'll probably settle in at about 10 PSI based on this pressure regulator. Just know that from the most basic setup, when you see a pump with a bladder, you can Google it, all that this is doing is this pump goes to fill this with pressure, and it's so much more pressure than we need, this reduces it to the 10 PSI. And what that means is this pump is really quiet and it only fires every once in a while. You almost never hear it running. And it keeps a perfectly even pressure by keeping that inflated. And you can see, so now the water's going through here. I have a shut off if I want to turn it off here and keep the pressure going, but I have it open because I have a shut off down the line. I'm using the Superflex tubing. It goes in the tent, comes over through here. I've got a shut off valve right there so that I can turn it off if I need to access any other part. After that shut off valve, I'm gonna install the blue mat. And so I'll get back to that in a minute because I wanna explain how similar all these are, even though they're different. And then as it comes down the line, it's a mess because I just did the transplant, but there's another shut off valve. And so the goal is, past this point, I'm gonna install all of these different irrigation systems so that I can turn this off, access this side, turn it back on. And then I'm gonna splice in each one. And so that comes, the water line, all the way over, and it comes into here. And that's got 10 PSI pressure loaded all the way into the float valve for the Thirsty Earth system. And so now when I run out of water and the water goes down, it actually shoots water out automatically, keeping this perfectly full. The reason I have that is the Thirsty Earth doesn't need 10 PSI of pressure. It just needs water in the cup. And the other thing that we're gonna use is the auto pot. And the autopot is a bottom waterer that just fills water in here, and all it needs is gravity. So it just needs to spill out of here. It doesn't need the pressure. So the pressure goes to the float valve, and now gravity just takes the water out the bottom. All I have to do is open this, and that will allow water to flow down and just dump out on the floor, or I can connect it up to whatever I'm running. And so the cool thing is we're gonna run 4 auto pots. We weren't gonna do it. We were gonna run 8 blue mats. I decided we're gonna run 4 blue mats, 4 auto pots, 4 Thirsty Earth Ollas, and 4 on the EcoWit system. So these will go right here because this extra space will allow me to fit these in right here. And we'll have 4 going down here. And everything's gonna be on the same irrigation system. Then what's gonna happen is on the pressure, we'll have 2 systems, and they're both gonna run drip rings. So I'm kind of getting complicated, but you'll see as we go. This is a bottom water. It's just gonna fill with water, and these 10 gallons, they fit perfectly in there, in the water, and they just drink it right out. It has a float valve that goes in here that allows me to fill up all 4 of these to the right amount of water without doing any work, all on gravity, and then it just drinks. So it's brain dead simple, produces significant results. We use the Tray to Grow, which is a bigger version, but these are gonna be perfect for the 10 gallons. So that's what's gonna set up on one. Then we have the Ollas, which you saw. Otherwise, the other 2 are gonna top water using these drip rings. And so they're just gonna set like this, and I'll actually be able to see the water drip from below the ring here perfectly through this 10 gallon. They just match so well. And the way the drip ring gets the water is through this little Superflex tubing that has to go down to a water supply line. And so what we're gonna do is we have 2 methods, and we'll be installing all of these so you can watch. But we have these blue mats, and I've been soaking them, and they're full of water. And these ones are pre-dialed. There's a blue and a red mark on there, and we'll talk about what that means. Essentially, one is for a full pressure system, and one's for gravity. And so I have an Allen wrench that goes right in here, and I can adjust the amount of water that'll come out. And then this reads the moisture in the soil. And so after we transplant, we're just gonna be putting these right into the soil like that. And then this little part just goes right into the drip ring. So essentially, this tells the drip ring when to drip, because it knows that your soil is dry when this dries out and pushes water through the ring. So all 4 on the blue mat, each plant will have one of these in it. Each plant will individually get its own precise watering. And what happens is the water drips from here and drips all the way down until the water hits here. It gets wet again and it turns the water off. So each plant will be intelligently getting its own water, which is so badass. And then the next setup that we're gonna use is firing the same drip ring, but we're gonna use electronics instead. And so we have a moisture meter, which we can put right on top of the soil, and it just goes in there. Okay, and that'll read the moisture, but it's not connected to this. And then that's only the top. You'll notice that one's a lot deeper. So we have the EcoWit Deep, and we're gonna actually run both, and we're gonna share the data across all the beds with you. But this deep one has a digital display, and you can bury this actual moisture meter as deep as you want. And so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna bury one all the way to the bottom like this in the middle. This will be in the pot like this, and this will be buried, and we can actually get whatever reading on the EcoWit and say, tell the computer, when the reading on the moisture gets to 30%, 25%, whatever we wanna set, turn the water on. And then tell it when the moisture meter gets to 50% watering or 45% watering, turn the water off. And this will fire the drip ring on and off. But how is it gonna fire it, right? It's not connected. So through the Wi-Fi, this will read the moisture. This will actually turn on and off the water according to this button or to whatever moisture settings you have. So all we're gonna do is splice this in, and it's literally this simple. Go right here, I already have the T in there. I put it in, okay? We're on now. I'm gonna open the 10 PSI of pressure. You can see it shooting water out. Turn it off, now it's locked. So now that is locked and loaded. All I have to do is put the tubing in and connect the drip rings, set the settings on here, and we're done. So I'll be doing that next when we actually do the transplants and these are organized. I'm gonna bury this, I'm gonna show you all my settings, and we'll fire it on the app together so you can see it run. The cool thing is when this is on the 10 PSI pressure, it's gonna count the number of gallons that flow through it. So I can tell exactly how much water is being used. And that's pretty cool. Maybe next time we'll run one of these on every style, even if we don't turn it on and off. just to count the gallons that each one uses and see the difference. I think that'd be pretty cool data. But that's gonna be right here. I'm probably gonna set it to the side. And the way that I do it's pretty easy. I just use this tubing, and we have these little connectors, and it just goes to the tubing, and then the brown tube goes off to the drip ring. It's like really basic. I wanted to do more today, but I really needed to set these up because we've got a transplant, and I wanted to document it. And so this episode was more about doing that initial mulch layer setup, how we do it, and then you'll see as we go. Next episode, these are gonna be in order. We'll probably have these moved, and then we're gonna go over the male and females and separate them out, and then talk about when we're gonna transplant. Lastly, since now you know that we can use an eco-wit to fire the drip ring, or we can use the blue mat to fire the drip ring, on a big bed like this, the drip ring's too small. So we use this same device, and we build a big drip ring basically. So on the left and right of the bed, I'll have that, and instead of the drip ring, we're gonna use drip tape. I cut it to size, I put the strips in, and now it'll water wherever I put these. So we're gonna have 4 strips in here. I'm not doing it today because I wanna transplant my plants, and then I wanna put the drip tape right in the right spot, and then I wanna secure it all. And then that entire thing will fill up with water and drip to the bed on the same tool we're gonna use in the other ones. This will be buried right in the middle. It'll connect here, and so this becomes the intelligent on-off switch for all the drip tape. When this starts to dry down in the soil, it turns the water on. The water right here will go into the drip tape, filling it up and slowly dripping. Once the drip tape drips all the way the water through to here and it gets wet again, it shuts it off. So it's fully automated. All hooked up to one reservoir. The water will be watering the bed. We'll have 4 on the blue mats here. We'll have 4 bottom watering. We'll have 4 on the eco-wits, and we'll have 4 on the OLLAs like you saw. And I'm just so excited to get it fully set up so I don't have to do as much, and we get to really go through like putting the trellis in, watching it grow, but that time's gonna come soon. I'm hoping I get, like I said, the results today. Either way, it'll be Monday when I record going over the results, as I've got to leave right now. If you're looking for this, just go to BuildASoil.com and go to the educational tab at the top, and you can get that. We've also got our supplemental soil feeding schedule, which we're gonna use for all of season 7, and I think it'll be really helpful. Otherwise, as usual, subscribe to the channel, like it, really helps the algorithm. Tell your friends about this, it'll help them grow better. And until next time, I'll see you on the next BuildASoil video.